Hey everybody, Cole here with Classic Mini DIY, and on today's episode we are going to be disassembling an HIF44 carburetor in preparation for a full rebuild. So stay tuned. Alright, now like I said, we are going to be disassembling this HIF44 Carb. Now, don't let its looks deceive you. It is polished on the top here, but I actually purchased this from eBay. It's used, and this side here has a little bit more wear and tear. But this came from a guy over in the UK, Adam Eastman. Thank you so much for selling me this. He actually has an Instagram called Mini Project. It's popping up on the screen here. It's spelled kind of funny. But he is switching to dual carbs. I'm considering going back to a single carb, and I wanted to do a rebuild series on this carburetor here because, well, the last one I got was from 7 Mini Parts, fully rebuilt. So if you guys are looking for one that's ready to roll, ready to bolt right on, head over to 7 Mini Parts. The link is in the description if it's something that you'd like to install on your car. Now, for those of you who maybe have one of these already, or perhaps you kind of like the DIY deal a little bit more, you can pick one of these up on eBay and well, rebuild it. So just a couple things before we get started. First off, I am going to South Africa here in about a week, which means that this is probably going to be the last video of the month, and it might be the last video for a little while because I'll get back from South Africa and I will be doing a travel vlog with that, and then I'll get back into mini stuff, so it might be the middle of April before we get another mini video. So don't fret if you don't see a bunch of new videos from me here in the near future. The second thing is that if you guys have any interest in supporting the channel, helping me pay for projects and things like this so I can share it with you, there are two great ways to support the channel. If you want to head over to patreon.com/classicminidiy. From there you can support the channel with a donation of $1 to $1 million if you actually wanted to do that monthly, or even just once if you want to cancel it after a month. All that money comes straight into the channel. I don't just pocket it. It really does go all into the projects and the things that I share with you guys on the channel. I'm very, very strict about what I use that money for. I'm not just like flying to South Africa, you know, on the Classic Mini dime. Also, if you don't want to support the channel on a regular basis, but maybe you want to help a different way, I do have merch. I'm actually wearing one of the shirts that I have. It's a Classic Mini DIY shirt. I've got all sorts of different things on my merch site. That's merch.classicminidiy.com. Now, that's enough advertising. I know that you guys don't like it too much, but let's get into the project. Also, one last thing. I know I said that we're going to get right into the work here, but I wanted to make an announcement. I almost forgot in this episode, but the valve cover winner has been announced, and I'm so excited to tell you guys that it is a friend of mine. I know it's probably, oh, now it's rigged, but I promise you it's not. I drew it the same way I draw all of these. It's a friend of mine in Hawaii. He has a green Mini, which should be popping up on the side of the screen here, as well as his Instagram handle. Go check him out. He has really cool updates about his Classic Mini. It's a project he's been working on, and the valve cover is going to him. I'm so excited about it. It's gonna look really good with that green Mini, assuming he uses it. I'm looking at you, Mike. I hope you use it. But that's gonna be on its way to him here pretty soon. And if you guys want to see it on his car or see updates about his car, head over to his Instagram. He's a cool guy, deserves a follow. But anyways, I mean it this time. Let's get into the carburetor. Now, one thing I didn't mention in the beginning of the episode is I am using one of these SU carburetor rebuild kits. They make these for all sorts of different carbs. So if you don't have the HIF44, you can pick this up for the HS2, the HS4, the HIF33, whatever. Many part suppliers carry this. It's a very, very common thing. So if you're interested in picking up a service kit for your carb, you can head over to the links in the description as well. Now, that kit I got from eBay was actually a pretty complete kit. It came with the heat shield here, the manifold, which has a small coolant run in it. So this actually comes from your heater into this out here. In colder climates or during the winter, that's actually pretty great. It helps kind of warm up the air a little bit so you don't get that freezing effect on your intake gases on the carburetor. It's something that happens with carbureted engines. There's a swirl of air that happens inside the carb when it opens up, and it super cools that air and then can end up freezing it or freezing the carb and causing issues with, you know, your whole running of the car. Now, like I said, the kit was pretty complete. Came with the manifold, came with the spacer, came with the heat shield, and of course the full-size carburetor here. Now, this carb is much larger than the dual HS2s I have. So the dual HS2s that I have are 1 1/4 inch in size, in this inlet size, and then your HIF44 comes in at 1 3/4 size, but you have a single carburetor, so all that air goes into your manifold and gets distributed evenly to your 4 cylinders. So why would I want to switch between a dual carb and a single carb? Well, there's a lot of different reasons. My main motivation with switching to this HIF44 is ease of tuning. With dual carburetors, you have to synchronize the air going into them. You have to synchronize, how quickly this float opens on both of them. They need the same needle. Everything needs to be adjusted the same so that you have a uniform level of fuel going in. And it's definitely doable. It's not like it's some impossible task, but I am getting kind of tired of having to tweak those and synchronize those and getting them all running. So I'm considering going back to this single carburetor. But from what I'm reading, I will be losing some low-end torque with those dual carbs. Apparently they have a little bit more torque at the lower end. However, this HIF has a much higher top end. So hopefully things will even out a little bit. We're gonna see how it goes. We're gonna test it out. And if I end up liking this a lot more, I probably will be selling those HS2 carburetors on the eBay store. So if you're interested in picking up something like that, if you want dual carbs on your car, you'll be able to find those on the eBay store if I sell them. Now, setting aside the manifold and the heat shield here, because we're not going to be, diving too much into those in this first episode. Really, this episode is all about disassembly. So, first thing we're gonna do is take out any of the extra nuts and bolts that we have here, which should just be these two right here. And keep in mind, this side right here, with this more unique shape here, this is the side the filter goes on. This side right here is the side that mounts to the manifold. And as you can see here, this is your throttle. So when you press your gas pedal, it pulls the cable up this direction and opens up that throttle to allow more air in and starts injecting fuel, and your float inside here will start to lift up, as you can see, and let more air in and let more fuel in. Pretty simple stuff. This is working on the same principle as the HS2 that I have on my car already. The only difference is that the float bowl is this right down here. The HS2 and the HS4 and the HS6 all have an external sitting on the side of your carburetor. All of that is internalized in this HIF44. Now, the first thing I'm gonna take off is the dash pot. This is the easiest part to take off first. Simply pull this plunger out, and this is what normally holds your dash pot oil. I don't think there's any left in here, but just in case there is, or if you're taking apart one that was on a car, this often will have oil in it, so be prepared to get your hands a little dirty. Now, the next thing that we're gonna do is take the 3 flathead screws off of the bottom of your dash pot. This holds this whole cover on. When I say dash pot, that's what this big unit is right here. Now, with those screws loose, this will be, free spinning just like this, and you can actually just kind of lift this off, and it might bring your dash pot and it might bring your needle assembly with it. Just keep in mind when you lift that off, this needle right here is the needle that allows fuel in and out, and people will change this needle based on how they want their carburetor to fuel. Now, keep in mind, this is something called a floating needle, so let's see if I can show that to you guys here. You can actually see it moves in there. And what that means is it's kind of like it does a self-centering, which is something that the older HS2s, things like that, don't necessarily do. It's kind of nice about this is that it doesn't bind as much. It has a little bit of free play, but it also doesn't give you as smooth of a fuel delivery. At least that's my understanding. Feel free to correct me if I say anything wrong in these episodes. But with that, you can just set this off to the side. We're not actually probably gonna do much with this here. There's no sense in taking the needle out. I don't think it's necessary. And this is really smooth. There's no fuss about that, at least at the moment. So let's just set that off to the side. And so now with that, we have a really nice look inside our carburetor here. And so right down there, that little hole, that little brass hole is your jet. This is adjusted up and down. So you can see there's a little bit, it's kind of recessed right now. That means that it's been adjusted down to allow more fuel in at idle and effectively make the mixture richer overall. If you adjusted it up, it would make it leaner. But I'll get more into that once we start reassembly, and if I put this on my car, I'll kind of explain it there as well. Now, there's one other thing I want to show you guys. See this little doodad right here? This is something that helps you tune your SU carburetor. Now, when you're tuning it, the whole kind of idea is that you're trying to find the right air-fuel mixture ratio. And when you're adjusting it leaner or richer, this is something you can lift, and you can see here, it lifts up a little post right here, which would lift your dash pot just a little bit inside here, and that's going to let some more fuel in, and it will help tell you if your mixture is right or wrong, and then you can adjust it further from there. Additionally, rotate this around here. So again, we're looking at the back of the carb right here. This hole right here is your adjustment screw hole. So this is what brings the jet right down in here, up and down, to allow more or less fuel in. And then of course you've got all sorts of tubes on here. I'm gonna have to look these up because I can't remember what each one of these does. I'm pretty sure this is your fuel line. I don't remember what these three are for. So I'll talk about those more in the next episode. Then moving over to the other side here, you have your throttle, which again gets pulled up and allows more air into your cylinders for bigger booms. And then you have your choke right here. This gets pulled and opens the throttle up a little bit and allows a little bit more fuel in, but not as much air. And that's used for obviously warming up your car and kind of getting it started in the morning. So with that, let's take apart the bottom here and get into the actual fueling system. On the bottom here, you still just have 4 flathead screws. Those come out relatively easy. As you can see, I've got a nice paper towel here, a shop towel, and I'm laying everything out on that. It's just going to help it keep it organized because, well, I don't like being unorganized when I work on these things because small parts are very easy to lose. All right, and with that, this cover should come off relatively easy. And so with that cover off, we're actually looking at the full internals of your fueling system. You have a rubber ring that sits around the bottom. This is a common place for it to leak, just FYI. And your fuel actually fills up this whole chamber right down here. So you have this right here, which is your float. It's very similar to the SU carbs that have the chamber that sits off to the side. As your chamber fills up with fuel, it pushes that and then ultimately stops the flow of fuel into that chamber if it's full, or the float is down, so the carb sits like this. I'll explain what that is since it just fell out here in just a minute. But if the float is down, it's going to allow fuel to fill that chamber up again until it floats up and ultimately shuts the system there. Now, as for the piece that fell out here, this is your float needle. This is what the float bowl chamber uses in order to allow or disallow fuel from going in. I'll talk a little bit more about that once it goes back together, but I just wanted to call that out real quick. Now, next up, we're going to want to remove this jet. Now, the jet is what is going up to the top of your carb here. This is going to get replaced as well with a brand new one. It's just part of that rebuild kit. In my experience, it's best to go ahead and replace everything if you have it apart like this. There's no sense in, having some old parts and some new parts. Just go ahead and replace everything. You'll thank yourself later. That comes out. And this is what your needle sits down in. I'm just going to set this off to the side with this little spacer thingy here that we have, just like that. That is actually your fuel feed. So fuel comes actually through this tube, sucked up in this tube, and out this hole here. Now to get your float out, this little float here, you're gonna need to pull out this flathead screw right here off the side, and that'll pull the post out, which is what the float itself is actually kind of moving up and down on. So your post comes out, set that down. Now the float should pretty much just fall right out the bottom. Now, one thing I'm not going to remove is the housing that holds the jet in. It's not necessary. It's not part of the SU service kit, and I don't want to take anything apart that I don't need to. So what we're going to be doing is simply removing this brass nut right here. That is what holds your float needle in and is going to do the job of letting fuel in and out. So get a little socket wrench and we're going to come down and take that off. Now, just so you guys know, that's a 1/2 inch socket. Now that's probably going to be a little tight on there because, well, this is normally submerged completely with fuel, so it has a tendency to bind because, well, fuel is definitely not a lubricant. Now inside here, it actually has a small little filter. This filter is not This filter is not reused, as well as this brass nut. This is not going to get reused either. So both of these are effectively going to be trash, but we'll set them off to the side just so we have a good look at everything that came off of the system. Now with that, we have a nice look in here, and you can see there's a lot of crud built up inside there. That is very common. This is where fuel ultimately gets filtered out and keeps this float bowl clean, because, well, the chamber itself, you really want clean fuel going into your system. So you have a filter here, and presumably you also have a filter further up in the line coming from your fuel tank to filter out really big stuff. But this is going to get cleaned really good. It's something that we definitely want to clean here, so it's ready for the new fuel and to work properly in the future. All right, so once you have that stuff out, you have effectively all of the easy stuff out at this point. Now it's time to start getting into the more difficult items. Specifically these items, you're going to want to keep most of this stuff in order when you take it off, just to keep consistency, especially if you're reusing a lot of these linkage parts, which in my case, I definitely will be. These don't need to be replaced, and all the spring tensions, things are feeling really good. One thing I am going to go ahead and remove is the adjustment screw right here. This should come out simply by unscrewing it. And the reason I'm going to go ahead and remove this is I am going to use a sonic cleaner to clean a lot of these parts here. They do need a nice tidy up, and a sonic cleaner is a great way to do that. Now you can have a good look at this real quick. As you can see, it has a small rubber O-ring on it right here, and then this is a very small screw here. So this is something you're just going to want to, it's fragile, you don't want to break it, so set it off to the side where it won't get messed up. Now, moving back to the linkages, let's go ahead and take the choke assembly off next. Now, it has a small washer here with some lock tabs on it, and you should be able to bend these down. All you need to do is get a set of needle nose pliers or something small to bend it back. They shouldn't be too difficult. Now, of course, I said it wouldn't be too difficult, and they're kind of being stubborn, so I'm gonna set this over in the bench vise, and we'll get this off here. Now, you should be able to see those a little bit better now. There are two small little tabs here to make this a locking washer. I've got those out now, so this should come undone without too much fuss. And if you're lucky, you won't hit yourself in the face with the spring like I did. But now we have the linkage off, we have our spring, and this is that little washer I was talking about. This one, if your kit doesn't have these, which it should, for some reason mine only has two, even though there are 3 nuts that need this. This one looks like it can actually be reused, but go ahead and set that off to the side and slowly take this stuff off. So now we have this tapered metal washer here that comes off with the tapered side down. And then we have a retainer here. This retainer comes off. It's just 2 flathead screws. And then we have our choke that has all of its assembly here. So on the top side, we have a really dry rotted rubber seal. And then this, without that seal there, will slide out just like that. And then we have a rubber seal down here. All of this stuff, yep, all that is fuel. So yeah, that is your choke disassembled, and you're left with an empty hole here with a paper seal that's going to have to get replaced as well. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is our throttle here. Now, there's a nut on top here, and then there's a nut on the bottom. So I'm going to take the one off the top here after bending down these tabs. I'm going to take that off first, and then we'll flip it over and do the other side. Our linkage comes off with our spring. This is a pretty high tension spring, just so you guys know, because, well, it's controlling your throttle. So that took a little bit of effort, but this thing ultimately came off there. Our throttle is effectively free in here. And with that, we should be able to take it off by loosening the flapper inside our actual carb here to get that out. So let me flip that over so you can see what I'm talking about. So now you can see we have our little flapper in here. I don't know what else to call this thing. And to undo this, you simply take out these 2 flathead screws. All right, and so that should come out just like that. And this has the number 5 on it. I have no idea what that means, but you know, whatever. And then we have the actual shaft here, which should slide out the side here. Might be a little tight with your with a rubber grommet on it, so I'll go ahead and pull those off. That is literally just falling to pieces in my hand. No wonder this needs some service. And yeah, this rubber grommet's also seen the absolute end of its days. So now we have our brass rod here, and with that we have our carb largely disassembled. So let's jump back over here and kind of go over everything one more time. All right, so what we're looking at here is our fully disassembled carburetor. So we have all of our small bits and bobs over here on the right. We have the throttle assembly here, we have the choke assembly here, we have our dash pot, our manifold, our heat shield, our carburetor housing. We have all the old little screws here, the throttle flapper, the old jet, and the float itself. Now, all this stuff is gonna go into a sonic cleaner, which will get really, really nice and clean. It takes a little while, it takes some time, you have to leave it, but totally worth it because you can get a nice clean assembly without any sort of harsh chemicals on it. And then what we're gonna be doing on the next episode is reinstalling and putting back all of our various different seals here. We're gonna put our new jet in, and we're also going to get our new float assembly stuff here as well. Now, like I said, that wraps up this episode. I hope you guys found it educational. It was really fun to do. I really like doing stuff where you disassemble it and really clean it out. This is gonna clean up really nicely in the Sonic parts cleaner. The whole system is just gonna look really, really good. But to give you guys an idea, I did put a link to a Sonic cleaner in my description, as well as the parts cleaner that I use for this stuff. Basically, it's a big tub. You fill it with the mixture based on the ratio that it tells you to, and then you just toss all your parts in there and you let it sit. It does this like sonic reverberation through the water, has a chemical agent as well mixed with water, breaks down all the excess gunk, and it normally runs for like 30 minutes plus. It can take an hour, 2 hours. Really, the longer you let it sit in there, the longer you let it turbosonic everything, the cleaner everything is going to end up being. Now, if you have any questions or corrections that you'd like to post in the comment section, please do. I'd love to hear your feedback. And again, I will be out of the country for the remainder of the month, so don't worry if you don't see a lot of videos coming, but there will be more a little bit later after the month is over. So thank you so much for watching this episode, and until the next time, enjoy those minis and motor on.